Hi, good evening, everybody. I'm Kim. I'm Sean's mom. Go ahead and move on in and move closer. Just a few housekeeping things. We're going to have speakers for about an hour, and then we'd appreciate everybody taking a look at our wonderful community supporters who are here with tables. And Ben & Jerry's will be here with ice cream from 6 to 7. Restrooms are over there. And if you need anything, look for the people with the purple armbands. Those are our team sharing parents, and they'll be happy to help you. Thanks. So I spoke at this event last year. This is our second annual Overdose Awareness Day event. And what I said that I feel bears repeating is we have money that's coming into the state that many of us have fought hard for. Many of the parents here have fought and rallied for opiate settlement money, and we need that money to go to help people who are struggling now. I said it in an analogy last year that while people are drowning, that having swimming lessons is a great idea, and I think prevention is great. But what we really need are life preservers, and we need every available flotation device to save the people who are struggling now. Thanks. I've spoken a lot, and I just want to keep my comments brief because we have so many great speakers tonight. I thought I'd like to share a poem that my son wrote. He was a very gifted poet and writer. I wish I had his skill. But this was a poem that he wrote about wings. I want wings, not buffalo wings, not Red Bull wings, not PCP wings, not badass hawk wings. I want wings you can't see, the ones that set you free, those held in the highest degree, that opens the door, turns the key. Not angel wings, not penguin wings, not Paul McCartney's wings, not pilot want wings. I want things that open your heart, not the ones that kept us apart. Those that give you a head start. Not your wings, not her cute wings, not his big wings, not their wings. I want wings to call me own, the ones that show how much I've grown. So, thank you. I'm gonna turn it over to Ed, who has our drummer Dylan here.
Thank you, Kim. Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm Ed Baker, and I couldn't be more pleased than to be with you here this evening. I'm a person in recovery from addiction, characterized by injection drug use and all the consequences that brings. I'm one of the fortunate ones. I'm alive today. I'm grateful for it. And I'm grateful to all of you for being here this evening. Thank you for sharing your support. Thank you for standing in solidarity with the wonderful parents of Team Sharing Vermont. Thank you to those joining us through live stream, courtesy of Town Meeting TV. You are here with us in spirit. Also here with us, for sure, are each and every loved one. Each and every loving one taken from us by accidental drug overdose. I'd like to begin our gathering with a moment of reverent silence, please, for those taken from us. Our friend Dylan Reich, with us last year as a senior at Montpelier High School, here with us this year as a freshman at UVM, is going to strike his drum. He's going to strike his drum 264 times. One strike for each loving one taken from us in Vermont during 2022. Thank you, Dylan. Thank you, Dylan. One strike for each loved one taken from us in 2022. This is not easy. Thank you, Team Sharon, Vermont parents, for your courage and your vulnerability. Thank you. Thank you for including us. It is our privilege, our deepest privilege, to be with you here tonight. There are those who would say that to bond in grief, to bond in suffering, is the deepest bond possible, never fleeting. Those of us here tonight would say this is true. We, and very many others who can't be with us here tonight, we stand in solidarity with you. We do not abandon those most vulnerable, those most at risk for death today. They are our children. We push on, we push on. We push on for immediate action. Today, now. We stand in support of a small system of overdose prevention centers strategically located in Vermont and scaled to Vermont's needs. These centers save lives. It's unequivocal. Vermont can easily afford them. Let me say that again. Vermont can easily afford them. Vermont now, because of the opioid settlements, has tens of millions of dollars flooding into it yearly. And this money will continue to flood into Vermont for the next 17 years. We can easily afford a system of overdose prevention centers, and we can end overdose in Vermont. These centers are medically necessary. They are the missing prong in a multi-pronged approach. Shoulder to shoulder, and what's most importantly, heart to heart. One heart. We here tonight want nothing more than to end overdose death in Vermont. Thank you. Thank you for your solidarity and support. I'm going to hand it over to Kim. Thank you, Kim.
Hi. Our next speaker is Kate O'Neill. I met Kate's mom many years ago, Maureen, when our kids were both struggling. We bonded then with the shared ups and downs that you travel with substance use, and bonded even more after our children passed away within a year of each other. So let me introduce Kate. Like my son, she's a wonderful writer, and she's shed so much light on everything that we're dealing with and what can we do to improve people's lives in our community.
Hi there. I'm actually going to have to do a little bit of reading because I'm not the best public speaker, so I hope you'll bear with me. My name, like Kim said, is Kate O'Neill. And when she asked me to speak tonight, I wasn't sure what I should talk about. My youngest sister, Madeline, died at the age of 30 after struggling with substance use disorder for more than a decade. But she didn't die of an overdose. According to her autopsy, she died of an infection that can be caused by injection drug use. That infection was treatable. What actually killed my sister was bias against people who use illicit drugs. In 2018, my sister was arrested. While she was being booked, she begged the cops for medical attention. There's video of her clutching her chest, saying she can't breathe, asking for help. But instead of being assessed by a doctor or nurse at the police station or brought to a hospital, she was taken to jail, where she continued to beg for help and continued to be refused until it was too late. My sister was refused medical attention because she was addicted to illicit drugs. The cops and correctional officers she encountered were explicit about this. This is what happens when you use drugs, they told her. My sister didn't overdose, but she died of the same bias that kills people who do. When bias or prejudice result in people being treated differently, we call it discrimination. And when discrimination is systemic, we call it oppression. This bias and discrimination and systemic oppression are the reason my sister died of a treatable infection, and the reason people are dying every day of preventable drug overdoses. I think that most Vermonters like to believe we are not biased in the same way as the cops and correctional officers who killed my sister. We would not look away, we think. We would not refuse to help. But we do. Our biases are not just evident, but obvious in oppressive laws and policies. We elected the lawmakers who refuse to decriminalize drugs, which would create a safe supply, which would reduce overdoses and the continued mass incarceration of people who use drugs. We elected the lawmakers who refuse to allow overdose prevention sites in the state, in spite of all the evidence that they save lives. We have words for many different kinds of bias: racism, sexism, heterosexism, ableism, classism. But we don't have a name for the kind of bias perpetrated against people who use illicit drugs, in spite of the fact that this bias is widespread and lethal. I don't think we have a name for it because I don't think we want to see it, not just in our laws and policies and systems, but in our individual selves. I live a block and a half from here. The first floor of my building is a parking garage. It's for nearby businesses, not residents, so it's virtually always empty of cars at night. People who use drugs and are also unhoused frequently take shelter in this garage, especially when the weather is bad. In my experience, they have caused no harm to persons or property while they are there. But I recently saw a letter my building's board president had sent to the mayor of Burlington. The first line of the letter claimed that people who live in my building have, quote, a fair bit of compassion for those who are unhoused and addicted to drugs. But the letter goes on to demand not that our mayor ensure everyone in the city is housed, or that he support a safe consumption site, or that he increase access to harm reduction services and low barrier treatment, all of which would be actual solutions to the problems the board president claims are happening. Instead, he spends page after page of his letter calling for more policing. I have witnessed the police show up in that garage, called in response to an overdose. The first cop on the scene did not have Narcan. It's not just the board president of my building who claims to be compassionate while acting otherwise. Chittenden County is probably one of the most progressive places in the US, a place that prides itself on fighting discrimination and trying to dismantle systemic oppression. But people in Chittenden County love to complain about downtown Burlington. The open use of drugs, the shoplifting, the panhandling. Even my most progressive friends and family members talk about it. This park, the one we're in right now, they say they feel unsafe here. Like I said, I live a block and a half away. I have dogs. I walk at least 3 times a day, so I'm out and about quite a bit, including in this park. I have never, not once, felt unsafe here. For a long time, I couldn't figure out the disconnect between what I experience and what people I know and love say they've experienced. And then I realized people are confusing feeling uncomfortable with being unsafe. I think that discomfort is a result of bias. And I think we have silently agreed as a community to mask that bias against people who use illicit drugs, against people who are poor, against people who have mental illness, behind complaints about public safety. We are okay with people sitting on the street openly using drugs, as long as that drug is alcohol and they're sitting around the corner on Church Street at a restaurant patio. It may be uncomfortable for some people to witness illicit drug use, homelessness, poverty, and the chaos that can sometimes accompany not having your basic needs met. But the people who are unsafe in those scenarios are the people whose basic needs are not being met. The people who are unhoused, who are using unregulated drugs, not the people complaining about them. In a story published today about this park and the people in it, the Burlington Free Press wrote, "Passers-by avoid eye contact and parents pull their children in the opposite direction." We have got to stop looking away. The opposites of bias are love and open-heartedness. The opposites of discrimination are equity and justice. The opposites of oppression are compassion and freedom. We absolutely need to make demands of our elected officials. We need to demand drug decriminalization, safe consumption sites, easy access to harm reduction services, and effective treatment. But if we want to prevent overdose and other drug-related deaths, if we want to stop the suffering that occurs in parks and parking garages, private homes and prisons, we have to stop averting our eyes or hiding behind complaints about public safety. We need to look directly and open-heartedly at what's happening in our communities. We need to examine our own biases about what we see. And we need to respond with love and compassion. Instead of condemning and complaining about people who use illicit drugs, we need to demand justice on their behalf. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kate. Thank you. It's my pleasure now to introduce Dakota. Dakota is a harm reduction specialist, a spectrometer technician with the AIDS Project of Southern Vermont. Dakota is a person with lived experience, and he's going to tell us his story. Dakota does outreach, syringe service work, and drug checking. Dakota spoke at our last gathering last year, and he's here again to share with us. We're very pleased to have Dakota back. He's going to fill us in on a very important project that he's working on, drug checking, down in Southern Vermont. Thank you, Dakota.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Whoop. First, I just want to say how grateful I am to be able to be here again today. Yeah. So when I was 15 was maybe the first time that I, took morphine for the first time. And that first instance was like, a key just went into a lock and my world just opened up. It was the only thing that ever made me feel normal, like I could function around other people and be happy. And it didn't take very long before I was injecting heroin and whatever else I could happen to get my hands on. And it wasn't long after that before my brother joined me in our wild and wacky escapades. And fast forward about 10 years down the line, and my brother and I are both fighting to stay sober, to hold any kind of time down, to just keep going, to not disappoint our families, disappoint each other, but, just pushing on. And one day I get a phone call from my sister telling me, hey, your brother overdosed, he's dead, yada yada. I thought she was joking at first, you're just fucking with me. And it wasn't until she actually came, told me face to face and looked in my eyes that I actually believed her. Because he had bought, he had maybe 8 months of clean time and had been living in Minneapolis, and he had bought what he thought was heroin, I'm assuming, over the internet. Got it, took it to work with him, and did it by himself in the bathroom, thinking the potency was going to be something he could handle and what he was accustomed to. And it wasn't. They found him the next morning, and a lot of pain and sorrow came from that, but it was also the final straw to me, where I couldn't put myself or my mom or sister or family through that again, and I just wanted out. And thank God I somehow it clicked and I'm still here, but this led down the road to me being able to, first it started with just, visiting the AIDS Project where I currently work, and I developed a very close relationship with the woman who runs the heads the syringe service program, Sue Connolly, and that developed and blossomed into what I do now, doing outreach and drug checking and syringe services stuff there. But a big big aspect of what I do is drug checking, and I just wanted to kind of, throw some more information around about it and about the effects we've been seeing on the people that come see us and how it's been fractaling out into the community. So any day of the week, Monday through Friday, hopefully, people can stop by, call me, call someone in the office to let me know, and stop by and give us a sample of whatever drug under the sun they want. And I'll take that and I'll take it back to our spectrometer and test it and get, a nice fingerprint of what's in that sample. Once I bring the results back to whoever brought in that sample, we talk about what I found and what was in it and what these things do. And I also like to ask them, how's this going to change how you use? How is this going to change what you use? How does this change about the way you think about your drug supply? And people have been extremely responsive to this. And, the first couple of months it was kind of slow with people getting the hang of it, but now I'm so busy I can't stay sitting down. People are left and right falling in, and people feel safer and more at ease knowing that there's somebody there that can tell them why something happened, why this didn't work, why I felt weird like this, what I can avoid in the future. And, you know, generally, people want to be safe, and they want to be happy, and they want to be healthy. And this is just one of the tools that we have to do that. And had this been more widespread years ago when my brother went through that incident, it might have changed that. So I'm very glad I can be here doing this and testing as much as I can to keep as many people as I can safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Dakota. Thank you so much. You know, our next guest, our next speaker is Jeremy. Jeremy from Ben & Jerry's. Jeremy runs the scoop shop right here on Church Street. I just want to say that from the first moment I interacted with people from Ben & Jerry's, they were all in. No questions asked. What can we do? What do you need? How can we help you? Ben & Jerry's. Jeremy, thank you.
As Ed said, I manage the store on Church Street here, and the reality is that we actually were the ones that needed a lot of help when we originally met Ed, and I actually had the pleasure of speaking at last year's Overdose Prevention Rally as well in Montpelier. But I wanted to come here today just to kind of share how, you know, addiction has impacted us here in Burlington from a retail community, but also just our scoop shop specifically. And this isn't a unique issue for retailers in Burlington, but we've had our bathrooms become a destination for folks seeking a private place to use drugs. And our staff of mainly high school and college students were regularly finding discarded needles and had even witnessed overdose in the store. And, you know, on this day a year ago, when I spoke here, or actually in Montpelier, we still had our bathrooms open and, you know, to the public, and we were constantly working to train staff, to adjust our policies and protocols, to talk with our neighbors like Ed, and to implement harm reduction tactics in our store to keep our customers and our staff safe. But despite our best efforts, we weren't able to make it work. And soon after I was speaking, we actually made the decision to close the bathrooms entirely. And that was a really difficult decision to make because we rely, you know, it's an essential part of our business to be able to provide bathrooms to our customers. And people were definitely disappointed and frustrated. And immediately after that decision, we also discovered how uncomfortable and difficult it was to explain to our customers why our bathrooms were closed. So to help with that, we made a little postcard that we keep over by where the bathrooms are. And people can take those cards with them, and then there's a little, you know, some words that we wrote down that give insight into why we close the bathrooms, the issues that we've had in our scoop shop, and how Burlington, how we can make a difference. So I'll read you what's written on the card. Vermont is experiencing a tragic increase in overdose fatalities. Our bathrooms have become a destination for folks seeking a private place to use drugs. We have worked to make our store safe for staff and customers, but the incidences have become so frequent and traumatic that we have made the decision to temporarily close our bathrooms. We feel deeply for those suffering from addiction and those who have lost loved ones to this disease. We believe substance use disorder should be treated as a public health crisis, not an issue for our criminal justice system. Harm reduction is an important part of achieving this, and we stand in support of setting up overdose prevention centers in Burlington. So everyone who comes to the store and looks to use a restroom, whether they're a customer or not, gets to read this message. And we hope that it serves to build awareness and support around action that we need here in our town. So at Ben & Jerry's, we talk a lot about our social mission and the need to serve both joy and justice. And while this is a really tragic and important need to organize, we also need to experience some joy as well. So we actually have two of our employees from the Scoop Shop who are here with us today. They're across the little walkway over there, Alana and Ella, and they're actually going to be serving some ice cream for us all to enjoy once we hear from all the wonderful speakers today. So it's going to be great. Thank you all.
Thank you, Jeremy. The ice cream definitely helps add a little brightness to our event. Next, our speaker is Senator Tanya Vyhovsky. I watched Senator Vyhovsky over the last year and been really impressed with her insight and her strong work in our legislature. We appreciate people, especially people who work in this field, who understand what we are up against sometimes. So I appreciate it, and thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. So I am Senator Tanya Vyhovsky, and I'm a clinical social worker when I'm not working in the Senate. So I see the impacts of these things every day. I'm thankful, friends and neighbors, that you're here for this memorial, and I want to start off by expressing my deep sorrow and heartfelt love for each of you who has lost someone to an overdose. We have lost over 1,000 Vermonters to preventable overdoses since the state started tracking these numbers in 2010. Each and every one of those deaths could have been prevented with better care, more compassion, and a change in the way that we handle drug policy. As many of you here know all too well, each one of those people was someone's child, someone's mother or father, someone's sibling, someone's neighbor, and someone's friend. And every one of their lives mattered. In their honor, and for their families and loved ones, and for everyone who is still struggling with substance use today, we have to do better. We have started to move in a better direction thanks to the advocacy of individuals and organizations who have pushed for years for change. Both the House and the Senate have approved some critical changes and investments in saving lives through harm reduction. This past session, we permanently decriminalized personal use amounts of buprenorphine, funded comprehensive syringe exchange, as well as Narcan and fentanyl test strip distribution. And this year, we fought for and passed a law that will allow and fund 7 comprehensive drug testing sites like the one we just heard about. These sites will provide a more complete and comprehensive analysis of the exact makeup of a drug supply, and they will save lives without the fear of arrest for operating or utilizing these sites. And as a senator, and more as a social worker, I am proud of this work and these changes. However, Vermont is on track to yet again surpass the 264 overdeaths from 2022 to have yet another record number of overdose deaths in 2023. A record we keep breaking year after year. A record that shows us that we have not yet done nearly enough. I personally cannot stop fighting until we stop losing precious lives to this treatable disorder. Substance use disorder and the overdose crisis is a public health emergency. a trauma issue, a human issue that we must meet with care, compassion, and health care. The criminal justice system is the very worst place to treat substance use, and yet that is our primary response. How many more people have to die before we finally end the failed war on drugs? It is far past time that we decriminalized the personal use amount of all drugs, allowing us to move away from criminal responses and towards healthcare responses that work. We know from our own history that prohibition doesn't work. In 1920, the United States made alcohol illegal and began a 13-year-long failed experiment in the criminalization of a substance. Prohibition didn't lead to fewer people drinking. It led to people dying from methanol-contaminated alcohol and violence spilling into our streets as bootleggers and gangs capitalized on an illicit market. And so we used the data and we made a change. We repealed the law and we moved away from criminalization. We also know from countries around the world that decriminalization works. Portugal decriminalized drugs over 20 years ago. At one time, Portugal too was facing an overdose crisis, but they responded very differently. And subsequently, they saw very different results. Instead of skyrocketing death rates and prisons full of people with substance use disorder and trauma, they saw people engaging in treatment, fewer people dying, lower crime rates, and an overall reduction in substance use. And other countries around the world have followed Portugal's lead with similar results. I was recently in Spain, where they also do not treat personal use of drugs as a crime. And while digging deeper, it was confirmed that their drug problem from the 90s not only has not ballooned out of control like ours has, but instead has improved greatly, and they've been able to invest money in comprehensive and robust healthcare responses to those who struggle with substance use. We can learn from our own history and from countries around the world. We can follow the data and science and stop wasting money, and more importantly, stop ruining lives with a system that every data point says has failed. Our country spends literally billions of dollars on the criminalization of drug use. Since 1971, we have spent $1 trillion on the war on drugs. In 2022 alone, we spent $39 billion. At a time when we struggle to keep our most vulnerable community members housed and fed, this is the true criminal act. Imagine the transformation that is possible if we invest this money in the expansion of harm reduction. Imagine investments in overdose prevention sites where people can safely use substances out of the public eye and with the care and the support of a medical team that can ensure that they do not die of an overdose while staying out of the chaos of an emergency room. A team that can help treat any wounds they may have, offer them counseling, support, and resources so that they may heal from the traumas of substance use. Imagine if we embraced housing first and expanded models like the Vermont Criminal Justice Reform's Reentry and Recovery Center that is just around the corner. Imagine training and resources for healthcare professionals at all levels and expanded treatment options, especially ones that take Medicaid, so that people with the least ability to pay are never turned away. Imagine if people with substance use disorder were embraced by society as people in need of mental and physical health care. Imagine if they were met with support instead of condemnation. Imagine if we poured our resources into helping people meet their basic needs. And imagine if we surrounded our most vulnerable Vermonters with connection and care so that we can finally break the cycle of desperation and trauma that has brought us to this place. We are already spending the money. We just need the will and the vision to change how we spend this money. I know that many in the community have expressed concern about the rising rates of substance use, rising crime, and rising violence, and the overall state of our communities. And I want to be very clear that these trends are not inherently due to illicit substance use. These trends are trends of despair, trends showing us that our communities do not have the resources and the support that they need to thrive. Trends that are in fact linked to the criminalization of substances that people are using to cope with despair. These trends are a result of a society that has decided that some people are worthless and should be pushed into the shadows. We have gotten where we are because of shame and fear. We have tried taking supports away from people who are using, hoping that they'll reach rock bottom. We've tried telling people all of the ways that they've made mistake and punishing them every time that they are down. And yet we wonder why they don't want to get back up again. We cannot hate or shame our way out of this. This has failed and we have to move on. We know that there is a better way and that we can keep all of our loved ones safe so that they are able to recover when they are ready. But in order for them to recover, they have to be alive. They have to be valued and they have to be welcomed members of our communities. We are Vermonters, and don't we stand Vermont strong? I know that we can do better for all of the people that are gathered here today and for everyone who cannot be here because they paid the ultimate price for our failed policies. And I know that we can do better for our whole communities. I will be going back to the State House in January to fight for these policies that center the humanity of all of our community members, and together we can pass them. I hope that you will stand with me, talk to your friends, talk to your neighbors, and bring them to stand with us as well. Keep your minds open to challenging the status quo that we know is not working, and let us together consider a new paradigm, one that may be uncomfortable for some, but will save lives. Let us stand together to fight for the lives of the people our society has brutalized, traumatized, and cast aside. Fight for someone with an experience that you do not share or may not even understand, because their lives do matter. I will be fighting for these policy changes because the lives of those who have died of overdoses matter to me. The lives of people still struggling with substance use matter to me. The lives of the friends and the family who have been devastatingly left behind matter to me. And I know that these common sense, data-driven changes will save lives going forward. They will help heal our collective trauma, and they will make a stronger, safer, and more resilient Vermont for all of us. So I hope you will stand with me and continue fighting so that we may change what we are seeing. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanya. Thank you, Senator Vyhovsky. We have a real advocate, a real activist in Senator Vyhovsky. Let's hear it for the advocates. Let's hear it for the activists. Let's hear it for the good troublemakers. Let's hear it for the bad law challengers. It's my pleasure to introduce one of them right now, our wonderful mayor, Miro Weinberger. Miro has been protecting the most vulnerable in Burlington for 12 years. I've had the pleasure to work parallel to him. I've had the amazing experience of watching him attack a virtually vertical learning curve and become a subject matter expert on addiction and addiction health very quickly. I admire our mayor deeply. He cares deeply about people who use drugs. He wants nothing more than to end overdose death in Vermont. Thank you, Mayor.
Good afternoon, everyone. Ed, thank you for that introduction, but more for your ongoing incredible commitment to pushing the state in a new direction. You are a remarkable advocate, and it is an honor to be here with so many that have worked so hard on this issue for so long. I think every one of us here knows that we have been struggling with this tragedy for far too long. Looking around, I know there are many of you here who lost loved ones in this crisis years ago. And I'm grateful that you continue to come out for this event, to bring your children and siblings and friends photos out for this event and post these here in City Hall Park as we have in the past, and that you ensure that we do not forget those that we've lost, and you demand action so that others do not have to experience the suffering that you have. Tragically, I know we are joined today by some for the first time, as you've lost loved ones in recent months. Just yesterday, I had the experience of meeting with Mark and Joe from Glover, Vermont, who had reached out to me to talk about their daughter, Jessica. Jessica was 39 years old when she died here in downtown Burlington of a drug overdose earlier this year. And it was pain I've felt before, but it was quite a pain to hear Jessica's parents share the love and the memories they have of their daughter, to see on their faces and hear in their quavering voices the agony that they've experienced since her passing. And, you know, it's painful, too, to know that her death could have been prevented and her suffering could have been addressed had she ever been reached by our system for treating opioid use disorder here in Vermont. You know, Jessica's story, of course, is far too common. Tens of thousands of Vermonters are at risk and are suffering today from opioid use disorder. Yet, according to the state's own data, many Vermonters, the majority of Vermonters, a sizable majority, who are dying currently from overdoses have never been enrolled in the treatment system that was built to protect them and that was once hailed as the best in the nation. You know, how did we get here? What happened? Just a few short years ago in 2019, it seemed that our efforts to reduce opioid deaths were working, that we turned a corner. Here in Chittenden County in 2019, we were down 50% from the overdose death totals in 2017, and the deaths totals were dropping statewide as well. That progress ended with the arrival of the pandemic and fentanyl in 2020. And now, with the 264 Vermonters that died from an overdose death in 2022, we are at more than triple the rate that we were in 2013 when then Governor Shumlin devoted his entire State of the State address to this tragedy, and to calling for an end to this crisis. Since that speech, and for much of this time, I've dug into the policies, strategies, and the realities of the overdose crisis, and we've really devoted a good chunk of the city team to try to work on this as well. And I'm grateful to have here today two of my department heads who are working on this issue. Chief John Murad, the Burlington Police Department's effort to be a part of the harm reduction effort, to be a part of the solution, is one of the proudest things I think the Burlington Police Department has done, and it is very unusual in this country. And we also have today our Director of Racial Equity, Inclusion and Belonging, Kim Carson, who is focused on this issue because an area where we see some of the greatest accelerating harm right now is within Black and brown Like so many of you, I found myself totally disoriented when, after many years of focus and innovation and many millions of dollars of investment, we saw this tragic, swift rise in the death toll begin in 2020. Since this turn of events, I have sensed hopelessness, despair, confusion about this challenge. At times, I feel as if like a dense fog has descended on us, obscuring the way forward that once seemed clear. I do believe that a day of reflection and remembrance like this can help cut through that fog. And knowing that, grappling with the reality that we are lost, I think can be a helpful way to think of the current challenge we're facing. Because we know, what would we do when we're lost? We go back to the place on the path where we last knew where we were. And I think that's really akin to what we need to do right now to get out of this crisis. We knew just a few years ago that this was a crisis of massive scope that needed to be confronted collectively and with collaboration across the state. During those years, 2013 to 2019, the overdose crisis was clearly Vermont's top public health priority, and it needs to become so again. During those years when we were making progress, we were all in on harm reduction. We need to be all in on harm reduction again. And we're not right now. Our treatment system was built to respond to a different set of drugs than the ones that are dominant today, and it is no longer nearly as effective against fentanyl and meth as it was just a few short years ago. We know that. And now we must make the investments in the system to transform it rapidly and to respond to this new challenge. And we need, I heard the senator say that this is an emergency. It does need to be treated like an emergency. These transformations need to happen with urgency. The tens of millions of dollars of resources that are flowing into this state as a result of the opioid settlement lawsuits, those dollars need to be deployed to that investment, and it needs to be happening now. It needs to be happening quickly. And I think finally, all of us who've been working on this challenge for so long need to admit that we don't right now have all the answers. We need to know that everything I just talked about may not be enough. And we need to foster an innovative spirit and find new ways to protect our communities from the effects of these drugs and to deliver life-saving treatment to more people. So thank you again for being here, for believing we can end this crisis. It is your commitment that will once again return the state's focus to this terrible challenge, and it is your love that will end these long years of tragedy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Weinberger. It's such an honor to have you here tonight. Thank you for making the time and appreciate all you do. They say in addiction, the opposite of addiction is connection. And I feel that for us parents, the thing that just really helps heal our souls is connection. I was at a dinner party a year ago, and we're just sitting around talking and laughing like you do at parties, and we realized that the only thing that really had gotten us together was that we had all lost a child to opiate use. But it's the friendships that I've made through team sharing that have really carried me through some of the darkest days of grief. I'd like to introduce my really good friend, Mike Henry, and his wife, Debbie. So Debbie is the other ambassador for team sharing, and she does a lot of the emotional support in our meetings, and I couldn't do this without her. And Mike? Thanks for being here.
Well, earlier on, Kim mentioned all the great speakers they had lined up. I'm not one of those, just another guy with a story, and it is an important story. Unfortunately, it's it's far too common, as we all know, and everybody out here has a story. You know, every family out here has a different story about a different person. Debbie and I live in Underhill, where we raised our two sons, Dan and Dave, and you know, they went to the local schools. And the story we're here to tell about is our younger son, Dan, whose picture appears here. He was always an outgoing kind of kid. You know, he would reach out, particularly to any other person who was maybe having trouble connecting. He always was kind of the protector of the kids who were having a little more difficulty, you know, than others. And as an example of the sort of person he was, at 5 years of age or so, 5 or maybe 6, he fell off his bicycle and hurt his knee badly in the driveway. Debbie ran him down to the ER where they're trying to, you know, stitch him up. And we cut his knee, and the nurse says to this 5-year-old kid, "Well, how many girlfriends do you have?" He says, "Oh, a couple of thousand, but most of them I haven't met yet." And that's kind of how he went through life. He kind of, I think, like Will Rogers, sort of viewed strangers as just friends he hadn't met yet. And you know, he went on through. In fact, when he was in high school, when the Columbine shooting occurred, you know, the administration was looking for just a mainstream kid who could relate, not necessarily the student council president, but somebody who was known well and I think respected, and asked him to speak at the assembly. And I'm sure he came up with something appropriate to say to make people feel a little bit better. He won a contest that was arguably technically a talent show, but arguably a really popularity contest, I think, you know, at the high school one year as Mr. Cougar. You know, he's just kind of an outgoing, easygoing kind of guy going through life. He did a lot of athletic pursuits. He did Taekwondo for many years, and he was also into bodybuilding. When he was in college, and he worked as a youth counselor at one of the local ski resorts. You know, he was good with kids and good with people. And when he went off, he graduated Johnson State College in 2003 and went out about his adult life. And he's still into bodybuilding and so forth and athletic pursuits. And he sustained an injury somewhere around 2007, 2008, 2000, I think it's 2009 or 10 actually, sometime in that time frame. And at that time, he was prescribed a pain reliever that was, you know, common at the time, and being the kind of guy he was pretty careful about what he put in. He studied human physiology more than most of us do, and was very cautious about what he put into his system. But he was down and out and in pain, and said, "Well, it's a prescription medication. How bad can it be?" Well, we're all very familiar with that story, and as a result, in October 4th of 2016, after many years of struggling with what had begun as a perfectly legitimate prescribed pain medication, he died on October 4th of 2016 at the age of 35. And unfortunately, there are just far too many stories very, very similar to this out there, and the medical community has greatly changed their prescription practices, reference opioids, but there are many, many people out there still dealing with these substance use disorders that are a direct result of that or an indirect result of that. And of course, that's not by any means intended to diminish the value of those who may have found their way on that path for some other reason. But that's essentially Dan's story, and I'm just sharing it for the sake of putting another thread in this tapestry that's becoming far too large. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Mike. Thank you so much, Debbie. Thank you for your memories. Thank you for your honesty. Thank you for your wisdom and your experience. Our next guest is David Mickenberg. David is a partner at the Burlington law firm Mickenberg, Dunn & Smith, and has been actively involved in drug policy since 1997. He started his career as the Drug Policy Alliance, where he worked on efforts to reduce the harms associated with the war on drugs, including a multi-year effort to allow Vermonters to access methadone treatment. Those of you who remember this, remember that this was very controversial. There was a lot of stigma attached to methadone. There was a lot of resistance to having methadone in the state of Vermont. Since then, methadone treatment has saved countless lives, have saved countless people from dying of overdose. Thank you, David, for your work. David currently works on a variety of public policy campaigns, including an effort to decriminalize drugs in favor of a public health approach, and the establishment of overdose prevention centers in Vermont.
Thank you, Ed. Good afternoon. As Ed just said, my name is David Mickenberg, and I'm here representing the Drug Policy Alliance and Decriminalize Vermont, which is a coalition of over 24 groups from across Vermont that are working to move Vermont, good catch, away from over 50 years of failed policy to a public health model that embraces compassion, harm reduction, and prioritizing the saving of lives. When I first started working on drug policy in Vermont 23 years ago, Vermont had no methadone treatment, no state-supported needle exchange, no naloxone, no hub and spoke model of treatment, no buprenorphine, no Good Samaritan law to prevent overdoses, no treatment in prisons, and no on-demand access to medication-assisted treatment. When each of these issues were raised, the status quo argued that such policy changes were too radical, that the criminal justice system was the place for these issues to be resolved, that harm reduction was enabling further drug use, and our system couldn't handle such reform economically or administratively. And yet it was through the work of activists like those here today, allying with supportive public health policy leaders, that positive change happened. And imagine a world where we had no MAT in Vermont, no naloxone, no syringe service programs. These changes saved lives and provided greater opportunities for Vermonters to live up to their full potential, to our full potential. There is more to do to save the lives of our fellow Vermonters, and I'm so heartened that we have all come out here today to recognize and honor those we've lost, and to support our collective efforts to ensure that no lives are needlessly lost moving forward. We need to build on our tradition of leadership in Vermont and do more to reduce the risk of fatal overdose, remove barriers to harm reduction services, and eliminate the systematic harms of addressing drug use through the criminal legal system. It's time for Vermont to fully acknowledge that the criminal drug policies of the past have not succeeded in reducing drug use or making drugs less available. They have not prevented the harms associated with substance use disorder or effectively facilitated treatment and recovery. Rather, criminalizing people who use drugs for simply possessing controlled substances has caused even more harm in people's lives. Arresting, prosecuting, and sometimes punishing people for possession offenses further stigmatizes many people who may have already had experienced trauma, isolation, and hopelessness in their lives. Records of conviction and even arrests that do not lead to a conviction frequently serve as barriers to housing, employment, professional licensing, and sometimes even education or public assistance. Rather than facilitating access to services, focusing on policing and courts drives people away from sources of support and fails to recognize that treatment and recovery are best facilitated by meeting people where they are and providing steady support rather than coercion. These concepts are actually not radical or even unpopular. A recent poll showed that 84% of Vermont voters, including a majority across all major demographics and parties, support removing criminal penalties for possession of small amounts of drugs. Furthermore, a strong majority of Vermonters support establishing overdose prevention centers where trained staff can help save lives. We are not a minority voice here. People throughout this state want a better approach. And together, this year, we will pass legislation to establish overdose prevention centers. And we will move our state forward. Yep. We will move our state forward in creating a public health-based approach to drugs. And for those not already involved, we hope you'll check out decrimvermont.org and join our coalition, which includes not just social justice groups, but businesses, former law enforcement officers, service providers, and many others who want change. Today, in fact, many of these groups sent a letter to our elected officials calling on them to get behind these reforms now, to look at the real evidence and show leadership again, and to be the state that we have been, one which treats all people with the dignity and compassion we deserve. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, David. Thank you so much for your work. On behalf of people who use drugs, thank you for saving lives in Vermont. I'm going to introduce our final speaker now, an unflinching advocate, courageous advocate. I've known Sarah George for 7 or 8 years, and I haven't seen her flinch once. She's in the face of the establishment, in the face of the status quo, standing up for people's rights, standing up for people who use drugs, standing up for overdose prevention centers, an advocate to the core. There are others here tonight that I just think I'll have to mention. Selena Coburn, Grace Keller, Tom Dalton, Jess Kirby, Teresa Vizina, and many others, without whom we would not be here. We would not be this close without their efforts over time. So Sarah George, please come take the podium.
Good evening, everybody. I fully recognize that I am standing between y'all and free ice cream, so I am going to be brief. Thank you, Ed. I was actually looking at my statement that I gave last year at this same event down in Montpelier and was incredibly frustrated and angered by how little had changed since I gave that speech at last year's event. I really was thinking for a minute, because I had a busy day, that I could just use the same speech again, and nothing would seem out of place. The same story about the first time I had to go to a scene of an overdose death, the same story of seeing a 24-year-old girl in her bedroom that would never get married, never have children, never pursue her dreams. The story about 13 years later, and countless more scenes, countless more calls, young and old people in our community, men and women, some with criminal histories, some without, some with families who didn't know, some with families who had tried everything, some who, despite their best efforts, had seen their loved one get strangled by every inch of red tape that our state has put up in front of them. All found in their homes, hotels, parks, public restrooms, and cars, found by loved ones, friends, and strangers. 13 years later of doing this job, hundreds of Vermonters lost, hundreds of Chittenden County residents lost. Since I was in front of this group last year, over 100 Vermonters have died. If you hear anyone, whether they be an elected official or not, but especially elected or appointed officials, telling you that we need to focus on public safety when it comes to this issue, remind them, demand that they acknowledge that harm reduction is public safety. And if they're not at events like this, or if they are speaking publicly, or if they are testifying in the legislature saying that we are doing everything we can, or that we are doing fine, they are lying to you. They are gaslighting you, and they have to be held accountable. If they are appointed, then they are appointed by an elected official. If they are an elected official, they are voted in by each of you. They work for you, and it is time that we start demanding that they do better or they find a new job. We have to protect people from harm by using a public health approach, evidence-based practices, and compassion. Basic human decency to transform our laws, our policies, and our practices. We must demand low barrier access to treatment, access to clean syringes, access to immediate and low barrier care, including trauma-based long-term residential care. The decriminalization of the possession of drugs and safe consumption spaces. If you hear people upset about seeing public use of drugs, ask them what they're doing to demand public safe consumption spaces. Together, we really can turn the tide of this pandemic. You have heard ways in which we can do that. We can move towards being a state that doesn't just say this is a public health issue, but actually treats it like a public health issue. When every decision that we are making, if we use evidence-based practices, a public health approach, compassion, and an absolute refusal to lose another Vermonter in this way, we will save lives. We will save Vermonters. We will guarantee that not one more person dies alone in a park, in a hotel, in a bedroom, or in a bathroom, because we've chosen to value their life more than we value archaic and punitive laws and policies. Police and prosecutors and punishment are not the solution to this. And we have been used as we have been told, you have been sold a lie that we are. We are not. Healthcare, housing, services, hope, compassion, happiness, joy, those are the solution that we have to be focusing on. To every single person that is currently struggling, I want to make sure that you know we care, we see you, we want to help you, and we will be there to get you through this. I think Senator Byhovsky said, and I will say it again, that we cannot help people recover if they are not alive. We have to do everything we can to keep people alive. And I do think we can do it. It will take a lot of courage from people who don't always like to be courageous, but I think we can. We have a lot of work to do. But if you believe in public safety like I do, I think we can do this. We believe in harm reduction, believe in human beings, believe in compassion, dignity, and humanity. I'm really grateful for every single person here, especially the advocates and activists that are doing this work on the ground, seeing the struggle that is happening in our community and continuing to do it every single day because they care about the people that they serve. And I want to be there to help anybody that I can. Thank you so much for coming. continue to demand answers, demand real solutions. If somebody, again, I can't tell you enough, if they say we're doing everything we can, they are lying to you, and hold them accountable for that. Thank you so much. I hope everyone enjoys the ice cream.
Thank you, Sarah. So, our evening is drawing to a close. And I know for a fact that as a result, we feel closer to each other, more committed, and we'll move forward with enthusiasm and save lives in Vermont. I want to invite you to socialize, visit tables, talk to people, and certainly enjoy some Ben & Jerry's ice cream. But before that, I'd just like you to bear with us just a few more minutes. I'd like to invite the parents from Team Sharing Vermont to come up, please. Can the parents from Team Sharing Vermont come up, please? If you're comfortable. Yeah. I want to thank you, and I'd like to give the crowd a chance to thank you from the bottom of our hearts.
Thank you very much. Go enjoy some ice cream.
Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try. No hell below us, and above us is only sky. Imagine all the people living for today.